How you doing, folks? Yours truly, Randee Ran here for today's talk. Today we talk to Dr. Shango A. Blake. He's the founder of the Tru-SK-Consultants LLC. He's a consultant, but he's a former administrator, and truth be known, full disclosure, he's a good college classmate of mine, a good college friend, a good friend of mine, and worked on a number of different projects for him. He's an innovator, as far as I'm concerned, in the field of education with regards to urban education. And I enjoyed doing the interview with him. We talked a bit about education policy reform. We also talked about how everything is done in a historical context. It's a great interview, and again, you might want to take some notes because this brother drops some very serious and pertinent information that will only benefit you. Thank you and enjoy the interview. All right, and we're back, and we are speaking with Dr. Shango A. Blake. He's the founder and CEO of Tru-SK-Consultants, LLC. He's nationally known as the hip hop principal, and he'll tell you why. And he's also featured in interviews with the Oprah Winfrey Show, People Magazine, 98.7 Kiss FM, The Joy Reynolds Show, WABC 7, and WCBS 2. Dr. Blake, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Randee Ran. I appreciate you having me. I'm happy to be on today's talk.
Thank you so very much. Why don't we get to it and do it, sir? And why don't you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Blake. As you said in your introduction, I'm known as the hip hop principal for the way that I've incorporated hip hop into whole school reform. I have over 20 something odd years experience of working with young people. First started out in Harlem, New York, and went through the ranks of the public education system. Actually, first, even before entering into the ranks, I started off as working in a community school, after-school program, then became a case manager for an alternative to incarceration program, getting young people out of jail and getting their lives back on track, and finally entering into teaching, teaching first in foster care and then in the various public schools. Went through the ranks of guidance counselor, assistant principal, eventually principal, and now I have my own educational consultant company. It's called Tru-SK-Consultants, LLC. The Tru is spelled T-R-U, and T-R-U stands for Teaching Reading Uniquely, and the other aspect of it is to reverse underperformance. So it's finding innovative strategies to improve the education and specifically target Black and Latino children and set them up in a position of becoming our future leaders.
Man, you've climbed the ranks, needless to say. And certainly that work is evident in where you've arrived at with developing your own company. Now, your work has been with children in the urban community. What strategies have you seen that's been successful and strategies that have failed our children?
That's an excellent question. Strategies that are successful are strategies, in my opinion, that focus on developing a conversation, a safe space, and engaging young people. And from every aspect, whether you're the teacher in the classroom, whether you're the principal of the school, whatever role you play, to be able to engage young people without judgment. Yes. And have a conversation with them that leads to a bridge to them having a greater awakening. I find that strategies that have failed are the ones that say, "Hey, here are the standards, here are the expectations, and you got to climb up to these expectations. And I'm going to judge you because you look like this, or you speak in this manner, or you're dressed in a way that I disapprove of." There may be valid points of view in terms of that. But what I'm talking about, and when you say strategy, you're implying methodology.
Yes.
And so to me, what I've always seen in terms of successful strategies, not only within my own experience, but even through my observation of others, is that those who take time to have a conversation with young people without judgment, to give them an opportunity to have their voice heard, and then use that conversation to build trust and then together climb up to the standards. I often say that we cannot stand above children and say, meet my level of expectation.
Hmm.
We have to get right beside them and say, hey, what's going on? Why are you struggling? What's your perspective? What is your point of view? And then how can we move up together? And that should be not just embedded in conversations and exchanges with young people, but
Hmm.
that should be embedded in the curriculum. That the
Hmm. Yeah.
curriculum should
Yeah.
reflect
Yeah.
their experience, their history,
Yes.
who they are, their challenges, their barriers, and also validate those experiences, but then turnkey those experiences to bring them to academic, rigorous instruction that are
Hmm.
going to help them break past some of the barriers that they've previously experienced, specifically in an urban school setting.
Okay. Now, I want to switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to stay with it for a little bit about educational policy.
Okay.
In your opinion, um, how much can we really affect educational policy in our neighborhoods?
Oh, we can have, there's a saying, right? And I know you're familiar with it, that all politics is local.
Yes. Yo, yeah.
So, so just the nature of that question in terms of in our local communities, there are many things that we can do to affect urban policy.
Hmm.
And the first thing that we can do to affect urban policy is to become active in the political process, active, civic-minded community members. Go out to the school board meetings, raise your voice, vote.
Hmm.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Sure.
Put resources behind organizations, politicians that support your agenda. We have to grow up politically to understand that the way in which we affect change within our schools is that we have to also be actively involved in the political process. And funny thing is, coming up, Randy, I didn't always understand that. How, even as I came up through the ranks of leadership in terms of the school system,
Hmm.
how much politics affect what actually happens in the school.
Yeah.
So, for example, I could be a school leader and I can have all these ideas in terms of change that I want to create within my local school, but there are also external forces that I have no control over that will impact my work. So I've learned the power of building relationships, coalition building around similar agendas,
Yes.
and the key word that you said is how can we,
Yes.
right? Because I can by myself do nothing,
Hmm.
but if we parents, along with educators, teachers, administrators, together collectively working, other members in the community to say, hey, this is the kind of schools that we want, and this is going to be the pushback that any politician or elected official or policymaker is going to receive if we deem that it's not in the best interest of our community.
We are speaking to Dr. Shango A. Blake. He's the founder and CEO of Tru-SK-Consultants, LLC. He's nationally known as the hip hop principal, and he's been featured in interviews with The Oprah Winfrey Show, People Magazine, 98.7 Kiss FM. I love saying that. I just still love saying that. The Joey Reynolds Show, WABC 7, and WCBS 2. And he's very kind enough to give us some of his very valuable time today. Dr. Blake, in your opinion, is there a market failure, say, where demand outweighs supply when it comes to education in our communities?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I would say that there absolutely is a market failure. You have a great demand for quality education within urban communities. And when I
Yes.
say urban, let's just be real, let's be straightforward. Within districts that serve predominantly Black and Latino children.
Hmm.
And we have had models or specialized schools set aside to try to address that demand. So we could look at charter, we could look at voucher system. All of these are ways in which people are trying to address that. But the reality is that the vast majority of our children still are in the public school system. And so you might uh, take a segment
Mm-hmm.
out
Mm-hmm.
and educate them and set them on a different course. But the reality is that the vast majority is still suffering from poor, subpar schools, are suffering from ineffective teachers, parents disengaged, poor school leaders, not enough financial resources. And now there's a battle that has happened between charter versus public.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have schools that are going into, let's say, public school spaces, and they're dealing with this term called co-location. And what happens is that it becomes a class war within the same community. Like within the same community, you have now a new form of segregation.
Yes.
Certain students are being segregated out,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to the charter,
Mm-hmm.
and they're getting the resources. And it's interesting. It becomes a class war because the parents who are politically astute know how to get their children into those charters, regardless of the lottery
Mm-hmm.
or the application process. They know about the deadlines where other parents are not aware. So they get their children into the charter schools, and they're pushing their children academically because many of those families already have certain things already embedded. They're going to want to see their children successful.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting the higher end kids going into the charter.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we are leaving children behind, okay? And they're being left behind in the public school. Now, that's not to say that I'm against charter schools in terms of its concept, but when charters were first presented to the Black community, it was supposed to be about community charters, civic organizations, church organizations coming together, developing charters, and controlling the education of their children.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're seeing now is multi-million corporations, okay, developing charters and becoming multi-billion corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even, it's very rare if you ever go through the charter process for a local community to get a charter, and then they're under a much greater scrutiny than some of the companies that come in, get charters, and have no oversight or there is hardly any review of what their practices are. So yeah, it creates this situation where there is still a very big demand for quality education in our communities. However, the supply is limited.
Now, you mentioned the multi-million-dollar corporations coming in and getting a piece of this charter school piece of pie. In your opinion, are these corporations also setting the curriculum that is to be taught in these schools?
In the actual, in the schools that they control,
Mm-hmm.
they control the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
They control. They have a lot. They have a lot more autonomy
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the organization of the school, in terms of the school calendar, in terms of being able to say who's going to stay at the school and who's not going to stay at the school. I mean, they have they're given a lot more latitude in terms of how they function.
Okay. Now, in your opinion, does that work to the benefit or the detriment of the students?
Well, it really is based upon each individual charter. I've seen schools that are charter schools that do some really innovative, great work in terms of curriculum. They infuse some charters have infuse Black history into the curriculum, do African-centered curriculum in terms of their approach. And then there are other charters that are very weak in terms of what they're setting in terms of the curriculum. Their whole market strategy is more of a school safety issue. So it's almost like the old argument with Catholic schools. Send your children to Catholic school because it's going to be a disciplined environment. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the most enriching academic environment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and there really isn't any research that says a charter school is more effective than a public school. Okay. But they sell the concept that charter, you get your child in the charter school, they're getting a better quality education, but there's really hasn't been any data that says one is better than the other. There's examples of high quality public schools that outperform charters and vice versa. The real issue is how will these resources be aligned, and what impact does a charter have on a public school, especially in terms of the controversy centered around co-location.
Okay. Now, what types of changes would you like to see in education policy that would benefit our children in urban America?
Well, the first change I would like to see is how urban policy is crafted.
Mm-hmm.
Who sits at the table?
Mm-hmm.
Who makes the decision?
Mm-hmm.
And from whose research
Mm-hmm.
is this policy being developed? I'm very passionate about urban policy, and one of the things that I have a problem with is quite often those who develop policy for urban schools have not been in urban schools, have not taught, have not been in urban school environments, yet they're coming up with policy that is supposed to guide us in terms of our process.
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect between theory, okay, and practice. And in fact, in my research, in terms of my dissertation, one of the things that I recommended was that you have to bring people to the table who are involved in urban education from every stakeholder group: the parent, the student, the teacher, the administrator, who are in these urban schools should be at the table helping to develop and create policy that affects the place where they actually live. Okay, so to me, the whole process is flawed. So that would be the first thing that I would like to see. The second thing I would like to see is more practical steps, applications on how to bring forth policy. So, for example, if the policy is, we can look at all these legislative acts. The latest one is the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. It's now been reauthorized under the title Every Student Succeeds Act, and President Obama just reauthorized that whole act. And so now states are going to have more control in terms of educational resources, setting standards. It's shifting from federal oversight to states coming up with these standards. Now, some people will champion that and say that's a good thing. States, it's local control. We should control what happens within our state, and it should be those local communities that make that decision in terms of how schools will operate. However, if you really look at that act, you're talking about the removal of federal oversight of schools. Now, if you're looking at this is a big move.
Yeah.
Since Brown versus the Board of Ed. Okay, because now when you think about it, what is the state of Mississippi
Exactly.
going to say about what is quality education in our communities? In New York State, a couple of years ago, when Governor Pataki was governor, he said that an 8th grade education was sufficient. So he said that, and actually, there was a legal dispute over that, and he was being challenged by the people who wrote the policy for Campaign for Fiscal Equity, okay, in terms of schools.
Yeah.
And Pataki won that case. So, the backdrop, though, is that there was also a push to align the resources to make sure that schools like Yonkers, New York City, Buffalo, Albany, that they also receive equitable funding to kind of repair some of the inequity in terms of the funding formula in terms of their schools versus more suburban schools. However, 8th grade was considered enough. So let's take that example. If that is the case, then where is the federal oversight that says, no, you have to make sure that there's equity in education in cities like Yonkers, New York City, Buffalo, and Albany. I used to work in Yonkers. I remember when I was in Yonkers, the big issue was that Yonkers did not officially desegregate until 2001. And the only reason why they desegregated was because there was a federal oversight over Yonkers that forced them to do it
Yes.
because they were being taxed. I mean, they were being fined year after year, so they didn't have the will to do it. It took a federal intervention
Hmm.
to do it.
I remember
Well,
that.
under this new act, that's gone.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of federal oversight. I don't want so much oversight where it becomes intrusive
Hmm.
and non-productive. No one wants that. However, hearing that kind of legislation, hearing that kind of move, kind of bothers me. Kind of bothers me because you mentioned Mississippi. You give a state like Mississippi that kind of autonomy to say, hey, well, you can make up your own guidelines and so forth and so on. Well, a state like Mississippi is going to say, okay, we're going to do what we want, and we're going to segregate again, and there's nothing you can do about it, and so forth and so on, which is going to create more of a need for some kind of oversight, you know.
And it also has implications for the books, the curriculum,
Hmm.
everything that goes into these schools in a specific state. Look
Hmm.
at Texas. Remember, Texas was
Yeah.
people saying, "Hey,
Yep.
slavery was a good thing." You
Hmm.
know, they
Hmm.
they slaves enjoyed that experience. It was
Yep.
full employment. They were basically sanitizing slavery through the curriculum.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
rewriting history.
Exactly. So these are some of the to me when you talk about policy and you talk about what needs to be changed. Again, I would say one that the main piece is to bring the stakeholders together, specifically in urban education. I don't need someone in Texas writing where most of your books come from, writing
Hmm.
books that are going to go to inner city schools in New York telling me revisionist history about an experience that's very important to our community. And the last thing is that on a national level, there needs to be an acknowledgement and that the curriculum as it stands is ineffective. I go back to your original question about what's the best way to engage young people or the strategies that have failed. When you have curriculum that does not reflect the experience and the perspective of the people in that school, that is a problem. So I'll give you an example. Global history or world history
Yes.
is taught from a Western perspective,
Hmm.
but yet it's titled world history. If you look at the curriculum, when you look at the contributions of Europeans to civilized society, it is extensive. When you look at Egypt, Egypt is not even talked about as, oh, that's in Africa.
Hmm. Hmm.
And on so and then you look at geography, they actually show Egypt not on the continent.
Wow.
When you look at the world map, if you look at the physical size of Africa,
Yes.
it's presented much smaller than what it really is. Where
Hmm.
there's about 3 or 4 continents that could fit into the
Yeah.
continent of Africa. So
Absolutely.
talk
Yes.
about who developed language. Who were the first people to engage in international trade and set up universities? These lessons are not being taught. So what does that do to a student who doesn't see themselves reflected into the curriculum? How do they feel about themselves when the perception is that all these other people created these things and we created very little to the
Hmm.
advancement of society?
Hmm.
Okay, if I take a picture of you right now and you're in a group, and I take this picture, I say, Randy, here's a picture, you're in this picture. You're not going to look at everything else first. The first place you're going to try to find is
It's
yourself.
me. Yes.
Once you find yourself, then you'll say, oh, there goes Johnny and Anthony and this one and that. But you're going to look for yourself first.
Yes.
So if I open up a book and I don't see self, then it becomes boring.
Yep.
And I'm not just talking about, and so then I disengage. And I'm not just talking about um, history, because every content subject area that we study has a historical context. If you teach science, you teach a history, because even if you're teaching about a discovery in science, a
Yeah,
breakthrough, there's a
that's right.
historical context for
That's
it.
right. That's right.
So if you don't allow these young people to see how great they are and what they've contributed, and then leverage that, okay, leverage that to, this is who you are, this is what you've experienced, this is how great you are. Now this is what you should be doing. How do you create your own history? How do you apply it to today? How do you become a critical thinker like this person who you are a part of that legacy? See, that's not being taught. What we're being taught is at the base level, the accomplishment of free slaves. But we
Yes.
don't go beyond the experience of our soldiering in America
Mm-hmm.
to know that we impacted the rise of just about every group of human beings on the globe.
We are speaking with Dr. Shango A. Blake. We're getting quite the education here, folks. We are speaking to Dr. Shango A. Blake. He's the founder and CEO of Tru-SK-Consultants, LLC. He's also nationally known as the Hip Hop Principal. He was also featured in interviews with the Oprah Winfrey Show, People Magazine, 98.7 KISS FM, Joy Reynolds Show, WABC 7, and WCBS 2. And we're so glad that he's given us some of his very valuable time today. Dr. Blake, I know that you believe in infusing hip hop into the curriculum of
Yeah.
schools. Could you please explain your philosophy in doing this?
Okay. Well, it's all about student engagement. It goes back to student engagement and high interest curriculum, and being innovative in your approach to teaching standard based learning. So, uh, just to back up for a moment in terms of the history,
Mm-hmm.
when I was principal of a middle school in Queens, I wanted to get the students to wear school uniforms, and I pretty much imposed a rule on them that they did not like. But we had 100% of the students wearing it. And that was an enforcement piece, but I don't believe that enforcement alone is going to uh, make a difference in terms of school climate. So what I did was I wanted to get buy-in from the students in terms of wearing school uniform, because I was dealing with a school that had all kinds of urban plight issues, low teacher morale, lack of community confidence, low instructional performance,
Mm-hmm.
violence within the school, gangs, etc. So all these things were prevalent. So the reason why I wanted to put the students in uniform was to send a message to them that when you come back to this school, you're coming back to a place that's different. It's a shift. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
same place. And so when I was dealing with the student resistance, I remember meeting the students in the auditorium and hearing from them in terms of why they felt that they shouldn't be forced to wear uniforms. And their reasoning was that that I was taking away their individualism.
Mm.
And I said to them, I don't see how I could be taking away your individualism, because you guys wear the same, at the time, same white t-shirt, same pants halfway down your behind. You got your bandana hanging out the back of your pocket. You have the same, what the students would call ice grill or mean expression on your face. You're wearing a uniform.
Mm-hmm.
You're wearing a uniform. And where did you get this uniform from? Or where did you get this idea? Well, through mass marketing, through pop culture. Okay, you turn on the videos and your favorite rapper was wearing something similar. So therefore, you want to be like your favorite rapper who's killed 29 people but never been to jail. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and lives in
Mm-hmm.
MTV Cribs, has the biggest house, and this is how he dresses. And so you're emulating a marketing strategy. And so what I said to the students was, we're going to take that concept and we're going to flip it in school. For the purposes of school, having a uniform will be cool, and not having a uniform will be uncool. So we're going to make a rap song about school pride, academic excellence, student achievement, wearing the uniform. I mean, and the students went crazy. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to make a rap song. I mean, just to tell you the power of hip hop,
Yeah.
they were all in. And so what started out as a way in which to get student buy-in to a cultural change and a whole school reform process led to students making two videos,
Mm-hmm.
two songs, two documentaries, and we then connected it to the curriculum. And then here's where the not really philosophy, but here's where the practice made sense was that we started to connect the love that they had for the music to the academic standards. So, for example, students who had talent in writing raps, they would be required first to write essays about why they wanted to be involved in the process. Then they would write exactly what they wanted to say in the song. They would have to understand the concept of context and setting, all the things that they learned in ELA. The
Mm-hmm.
students who were involved in the video, 'cause we had student filmmakers, and we connected the film process to the writing process. So what did that mean? They had to understand that when you write an essay, what do? You write, you rewrite, you revise, you edit. When you film, what do? You sequence, you storyboard, you
Mm-hmm.
shoot different scenes, you edit. So in order for you to be an effective filmmaker, you have to be an effective writer. You have to know before you even pick up the camera, you write what is called a treatment. So we were teaching them. It was basically a project-based learning assignment. All
Mm-hmm.
right, connecting them to something that they loved. Okay, but at the same time, when we taught them that, we would say, now what is this? What we're doing? What standard does this relate to? So now the standard is not something that's just something on a board that a teacher just puts up there because they're required to, because somebody's going to come in and check and see all the standards on the board.
Yeah.
What they was doing, they were actively using the standards. Math. What did we do with math? Okay, I had students who were involved in every part of the process. We had a production company that came in and taught the students filmmaking. And when we sat down with the production company, I had students with me who helped negotiate the price. Students figured out, wait a minute, we're going to be given this kind of budget, but we have to produce this kind of product. So therefore, in order for us to recoup and earn a profit, we'll have to sell the DVDs at this cost.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to do this without making sure that we don't undercut the quality of what we're presenting. So they were learning math concepts. They were learning critical thinking skills,
Mm-hmm.
science. They had Apple Macs. They were learning Final Cut Pro. They were learning iMovie, and they were figuring out how to take their concepts and writing and now go in and actually do the technological piece in terms of editing their shorts. So one of the proudest moments I had is when my students went to Tribeca Film Festival,
Mm-hmm.
and they got up there, showed their video and documentary, and then explained to those at the Tribeca Film Festival the concept of what they were trying to create, the message in terms of what they were saying, and the setting in which this message was being given, which was a school that was on the move in terms of whole school reform. So for me, hip hop is a means of developing a high interest curriculum, right? That engages young people where they are, like I said before, and then move them to the standards. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I would say on that is that hip hop is what I use, but it could be a gospel choir. It could be a soccer team. Mm-hmm. Every school has their own culture. Every student or student group have their own interests. Education is about making a connection. All right. And once you make that connection, you hook the students on to something that is deeper. So use the things that are active in that community to get the students excited about participating, and in the process, drive the students towards the goal of academic excellence.
Okay, we are in the home stretch here of the interview, Dr. Blake. And as I've mentioned before, we are speaking with Dr. Shango A. Blake. He is the founder and CEO of Tru-SK-Consultants, LLC, nationally known as the Hip Hop Principal, as he so eloquently explained why. And he was also featured in interviews on the Oprah Winfrey Show, People Magazine, 98.7 KISS FM, The Joy Reynolds Show, WABC 7, and WCBS 2. Dr. Blake, if you could please speak to the vulnerability of our students that attend subpar or low performing schools?
I think it's absolutely criminal. And you cannot talk about these subpar schools without the overlay of history. Okay, everybody always talks about inner city, urban schools, failure. This is not by accident. And that's what we need to understand.
Mm.
And anybody who is who in 2016 still believes that this happened by an accident is not in touch with reality. So we have to understand, one, again, history. What was our soldiering in America? You know, what happened to us post-slavery? Coming out of slavery, there were several independent church house, one school, rooms, church houses, where there was great academic excellence taking place. Teachers were teaching students, black teachers, with this sense of education is your passport to liberation, with this mindset that you have to be 20 times as good as your white counterpart to succeed in this society. So the teachers in those schools at that time, they weren't just teachers, they were missionaries. They were mission oriented in their approach. Okay? After that, of course, we had to deal with first the segregation of schools, right? We had to deal with separate but unequal, and then we had the Brown versus Board of Education decision,
Mm-hmm.
and the only thing it did was make it no longer separate but still unequal.
Yes.
Because in many of the schools that integration took place
Mm-hmm.
within the school,
Mm-hmm.
there was different tracking systems.
Mm-hmm.
So there was integration within the school. Certain students were given certain classes that were designed to teach mastery, while other students were given classes that were going to make them the next workers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to shout out my son. He had said one time that he did a project for his school, and he said that they were talking about education and why inner city young people don't do as well as their suburban counterparts. And he had pointed out in a videotape that President Obama had went to some school in the suburb. I wish I could remember it. And he said to the students there, I'm happy to be here speaking to the future leaders of America. And then he went to an inner city school and he said, I'm pleased to be speaking to the future workers of America.
Mm.
To me, there lies the problem.
Wow.
There's a set of expectations for one and a set of expectations for the other. And if you take a look at our experience post-slavery, you take a look at what happened with integration, then segregation, integration, and then back to de facto segregation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a set of expectations for one, which to me influences policy.
Yes.
Which to me creates these poor schools, which are in poor communities based upon years of oppression that continue to this day. So if you have people in the community that are being socially engineered in one direction, then why are you surprised by the results?
Yes.
So many of the students in these schools who come from disintegrated families, who come from poverty, who come from hostile environments, and all of these places that they come from were not places that just happened. They were ghettos that were created. And see, we got to deal with that.
Yes.
So, so the students coming up in these schools, I believe, are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, because they have been put in a war-torn like environment, and then expected to come to school and perform as their counterparts who have not experienced that kind of traumatic experience. And the thing is that it's not that the students in these schools are not brilliant, because I believe that the brightest and the best that America will find, the solutions to America's problems, will be found in inner city schools. But it is that they have been placed in a harmful situation by design on a track that is clearly set for them to go into uh, the prison population. And so the effects of these schools is that we have more prisons being built.
Yes.
We have less students being prepared. You have students who are graduating from high school and having to take remedial college courses and pay for it.
Yeah.
So they're in school not even earning credits.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like a vicious cycle.
Yes.
And I think that we need to start to really deal with the fact that this came from policy.
Nothing but policy.
Policy. People say, hey, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to deal with it. And the policy was clearly along racial lines.
Yeah.
And it was based upon a bias and a prejudice. One set of expectations for one group, a different set of expectations for the other.
We have been speaking to Dr. Shango A. Blake, who's the founder and CEO of Tru-SK-Consultants, LLC, nationally known as the Hip Hop Principal, and he was featured in interviews on the Oprah Winfrey Show, People Magazine, 98.7 KISS FM, The Joy Reynolds Show, WABC 7, and WCBS 2. Dr. Blake, thank you so very much for giving us some of your very valuable time as we are filming this early in the morning. And so grateful to you for giving us some of your very valuable time. Now, if you could, please feel free to plug your website or any other projects that you are involved in.
Okay, thank you. Well, if anybody wants to find out about my work, they can go to www.tru-sk-consultant.com. So that's www.tru-sk-consultants.com. And you can find out about some of the work that I do in terms of urban education. If you're looking to have me come speak to your group or organization, you can find out information about that. And I'm constantly updating that website in terms of some of the things that I'm involved in.